US President Joe Biden has issued an urgent warning of a growing Russian threat on US businesses. This comes as, according to US intelligence, Moscow is now ramping up its efforts to launch attacks on American cyberspace. Our correspondent Susan Tehrani earlier spoke to cybersecurity expert Ivana Strander to talk about the issue and the US preparedness to counter the growing threat. Listen in.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday offered a stark warning that evolving intelligence shows Russia is exploring options for possible cyber attacks against U.S. targets.
The point is that he has a capability. He hasn't used it yet, but it's part of his playbook. And I've warned about the potential for Russian conduct to malicious cyber activity in response to the cost we'd impose with our allies and partners on the world. But look, today my administration has issued new warnings that based on evolving intelligence, Russia may be planning a cyber attack against us.
This in response to the Western sanctions imposed on Moscow over the war in Ukraine. According to Dr. Ivana Strander, who is an advisor to the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Moscow's cyber attacks, which have been relatively limited so far, will likely become more aggressive as the country's economic conditions deteriorate, notably since Russian President Vladimir Putin described sanctions as an act of war.
The real question that we need to ask ourselves is how it's going to benefit Russia, because Russian military certainly it's notorious for its hybrid warfare that includes not only kinetic use of force but also information security tools. And given that it's very, very unlikely that Russia will use any kinetic use of force against the United States, this is a wonderful opportunity for Russia to retaliate in cyberspace. And make no mistakes, Russia is certainly a cyber superpower and that pays special attention to information security. Russia has shown that it's very capable of strong and powerful cyber attacks.
And how prepared is the United States for a cyber attack by Russia?
The United States is certainly one of the most powerful cybersecurity countries in the world. And at this point, there are several things I think that we have to do. Number one thing is, I think banks and different financial institutions might be at risk. I don't know how this is going to impact also individuals, but the Homeland Security should definitely provide very clear guidance to Americans about basic cyber hygiene, not to panic them further, but to give them like very clear guidelines about updating softwares, use strong passwords, to think several times before you click on any links, to use VPN systems. So that's one thing that we have to do.
In Europe, Italy's public sector will be instructed to replace the Russian antivirus software Kaspersky to prevent disruption of services. Just last week, Germany's cyber watchdog BSI warned against using Kaspersky amidst Russia's threats against the EU and NATO. The fear is that the Russian government could pressure the Moscow-based company to perform cyber attacks, a scenario Kaspersky denies.
Even during the invasion in 2014, there was this famous cyber attack, for example, in France on TV Monde 5. What does it mean? It means that Russia certainly will use every possible tool to weaponize internet, to disrupt Europe and to distract Europe and our allies from what's happening in Ukraine.
Meanwhile, there is also concern that hacktivists who have joined both sides of the cyber conflict could trigger escalation, either by accident or as state actors operating as vigilantes.
The collective group Anonymous has claimed responsibility, for example, for cyber attacks inside Russia. So far, these attacks have been disruptions and embarrassments, for example, playing the Ukrainian national anthem on Russian TV, so on and so forth. However, experts believe that if they get out of hand, they could cause widespread damage.
I have no doubts that also Vladimir Putin already probably thinks that the majority of those hacktivists are operating on behalf of different Western nations. And in the case of cyber retaliation, he can use that as a pretext for escalating further in cyberspace. Although it would not, I think, benefit Putin to escalate in cyberspace unless it's covered.
WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.